So here's a second video for the progressive unit. We're going to be talking about the struggle of some of the groups, particularly women in America, and then the success that follows. So these are the main topics that we're going to be covering. Let's jump right into it. Now we have a lot of things going on here, so make sure that you kind of follow along. A key goal of women reformers was to limit the number of hours that were actually worked, and they succeeded in some states. In Muller versus Oregon, it was argued that long working hours harmed working women and their families. The Supreme Court actually agrees. So based on their role as moms, it was said that a woman could be placed in a class by themselves. And as a result, laws could limit the number of hours that women worked, even if similar laws were not allowed for men. Now, at the time, progressives viewed this decision as a victory for women workers. But in later years, this was the same ruling that was used to justify paying women less than men for the same job. Now we're moving on to Florence Kelley. So Florence Kelley believed that women were hurt by unfair prices of goods, of things that they had to buy to run their homes. And in 1899, she helped to find the National Consumer League, the NCL, which is still active today. So basically, the NCL gives special labels to goods that are produced under fair, safe, and healthy working conditions, urging women to buy these products that are done in good factories versus buying products that didn't have any labels. The NCL also pushed for laws to inspect the meatpacking plants, to make the workplaces safer, and to also make payments for people that are unemployed. Florence Kelley also helped form the Women's Trade Union League, which is another group that helped to improve female working conditions for female factory workers. The WTUL pushed for federal laws that would set a minimum wage and an 8-hour workday. Florence Kelley also helped form the Women's Trade Union League, which was another group that improved conditions for female factory workers. They pushed for federal laws that would set a minimum wage and an 8-hour workday. And it also helped to create the first workers' strike fund, which could be used to support families who refused to work in unsafe or unfair conditions. Now, the main goal of the progressive women was to improve family life, and they pushed for laws that would keep mothers and their families healthy and safe. So this was one of the things that was behind the temperance movements, which was led by the Women's Christian Temperance Union. So in 1874, Frances Willard formed the Women's Christian Temperance Union. The WCTU educated women about the evils of alcohol, and they tried to make it illegal. So this group promoted temperance, which is the practice of never drinking alcohol. And the women that were part of this movement felt that alcohol led to men spending their money on liquor, on neglecting their families because they were hanging out in bars, or on abusing their wives because they would come home drunk and then just kind of beat up their wives and kids. Their work led to the passage of the 18th Amendment. And the 18th Amendment outlaws the production and the sale of alcohol. And you can see here by the newspaper heading, U.S. is voted dry. Now, we have a couple of other people here. Right in the middle, you have Margaret Sanger. So nurse, she was a nurse, Margaret was a nurse, that thought women's life and women's health could be improved if mothers actually had fewer kids. And in 1916, Margaret was actually 1 out of 11. She opens up the country's first birth control clinic. She was jailed several times, but she kept on with this birth control. And in 1921, she founded the American Birth Control League to help make information available to women in terms of family planning. And finally, the final woman that you have down here is right at the bottom, Ida B. Wells. We've heard her before because we know that she was associated with the movement against lynching, but she also helped create the National Association of Colored Women. And this group helped to make families strive for success and to assist those that were less fortunate. It also set up daycare centers to protect and educate black children while their parents went to work. Now let's think. You have 3 different pictures here. I want you guys to just look at the very top one where you have the booze that's walking. What is the message behind this picture? Why was this picture created and printed in a publication? And then look down at some of the things at the bottom. Help me to keep him pure. Please vote against the sale of liquors. I never knew I had a wonderful wife until the town went dry. What is the purpose behind these flyers? So let's talk about the women's suffrage movement and the women's fight for the right to vote. We've talked about this briefly before, so we're going to get really into it now. One of the boldest goals of the progressive women was suffrage, the right to vote. They argued that this was the only way that they could actually make sure that government would protect kids, would promote education, and would support family life. Women needed the right to vote in order to actually get involved in politics. And so you had lots of reformers that popped up during this time. So since the 1860s, reformers like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which we have talked about, worked tirelessly for the right to vote, to have a voice in political issues. They failed at the federal level, but by the end of the 1890s, women in the western states like Wyoming and Colorado had won the right to vote. And this is the chart that you have in front of you right now. You can see that the states that are in purple had complete voting rights. They could vote for every single election, no matter what level, local, state, or federal. The ones that were in the orange or in the yellow, whatever color, was voting only in presidential elections. That's it. Women could only vote for the president. The pink meant that they could vote in primaries, and then the brown meant that they couldn't vote anywhere. Couldn't vote in anything, no voting at all. Now, we have the introduction of a few other people that pop up. Carrie Chapman Catt, CCC, she re-energizes the national suffrage effort when she becomes president of NAWSA. And we've heard of NAWSA before because of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And she becomes president, Carrie becomes president in 1900. Now, while the suffrage movement gains momentum from the state-by-state promotion, some women actually worked against it. Remember, not everyone wanted suffrage. And you had the development of the National Association opposed to women's suffrage, the NAOWS. And they believed that the effort to win the right to vote would actually take women's attention away from family and away from volunteer work that benefited society in many more ways. So some women, known as social activists, decided that maybe NAWSA was just moving a little bit too slow for their pace, and they grew a little bit more daring in their strategies to try to win the right to vote. Alice Paul is one of them. So Alice Paul is a Quaker from New Jersey, and she becomes the new face of suffrage. In 1917, she creates the NWP, which stands for the National Woman's Party, and it becomes the first group to march with picket signs outside of the White House. Hundreds of women were arrested. A few of them actually went on hunger strikes while they were in prison until they could actually get the right to vote. The NWP methods angered a lot of people, including some of the women in other suffrage groups. Like Carrie Chapman Catt did not agree with Alice Paul and the NWP. Regardless, they did help win women the right to vote, and even though the NWP's actions were a little bit more radical, at the end, they were all there for the same cause. In June of 1919, Congress approves the 19th Amendment, which states that the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. Basically, women have the right to vote. On August 20, 1820, the Tennessee State House Representative passes the amendment by a single vote. And with Tennessee actually passing the ratification of this amendment, enough states had passed it as well, and it officially becomes official. Women could vote, 19th Amendment. Even today, August 20th is still known as Women's Equality Day. Now, let's take a look at these two political cartoons. What is the message behind each of these? Think about it, look at the picture, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. All right, so shifting our focus from women and going toward African Americans for a few. Excuse me. In the face of the injustices against African Americans, we know that we had two leaders pop up. You had Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington told blacks to move slowly toward progress, work hard, and wait patiently. Eventually, you'll gain the white Americans' respect, and you'll be able to exercise your full voting rights and citizenship rights. On the other hand, you had W.B. Du Bois that urged them, African Americans, to demand their rights immediately because they were already guaranteed by the Constitution. The Niagara movement denounces the idea of gradual progress. Basically, move forward. It kind of takes the ideas behind W.B. Du Bois. But it actually never grows stronger than maybe a few hundred people. To make the difference, African Americans needed a more powerful voice. The Niagara movement was just kind of the start. And really, the NAACP, or the NAACP, is kind of what takes hold. So the NAACP is happens, or basically gets created because of a riot that occurs. So in the summer of 1908, a white mob in Springfield, Illinois, attempts to lynch two African American prisoners in the city jail. They learned that the prisoners had been removed to safety, so they can't kill these prisoners. So instead, they turn to the city's black residents, and they kill two black residents, and they burn 40 homes. So the Niagara movement members were so outraged that this could actually happen, and this was in Abraham Lincoln's hometown. And the riot catches the attention of several white reformers as well. So together, leaders of the Niagara movement and these white reformers come together to form the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And basically, it's created to help African Americans be physically free from the forced low-pay labor, mentally free from ignorance, and politically free from disenfranchisement, and socially free from insults. So it's supposed to help Native Americans achieve equality and to rise up. And this was, again, a collaboration between people from the Niagara movement and white reformers. Now, we have reached the end of this video. Make sure that you guys are able to answer these 10 questions, and I will see you guys tomorrow in class.